Hello students, in the last video we studied about the other two parts of the brain, that is cerebrum and cerebellum. Today we'll be talking about the third part of the brain, that is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata, which is present right at the base of the brain, and that is roughly triangular in shape, and it continues to form the spinal cord. Function of medulla oblongata is to control the involuntary actions like beating of heart, breathing, then the movement of other internal organs, the movement of the elementary movement of food in the alimentary canal, and controlling and coordinating the other internal organs. These all things are controlled by medulla oblongata. Let us now study the three primary regions of the brain. First is forebrain. Forebrain contains cerebrum and diencephalon. Cerebrum, as we know, that is the largest part of the brain, and diencephalon, that contains thalamus and hypothalamus. Thalamus, that conveys pain and pressure impulses to the cerebrum, and hypothalamus, that controls the body temperature as well as it controls the pituitary gland. Then coming to the midbrain is nothing but the small tubular part that involves in the coordinating eyes and ears responses. And the last comes hindbrain, that contains cerebellum, pons, and medulla oblongata. Cerebellum, as we studied, that it controls the balance of the body and coordinate the balance of the body. Pons, as we know, cerebellum is also divided into two hemispheres. So pons helps in conveying the message from the one hemisphere to another hemisphere. And then coming to medulla oblongata, that controls the activities of the internal organs, heartbeat, breathing, etc. As we studied now about the brain, that is the first part of the central nervous system, and the next we'll be talking about spinal cord, which is the second part of the central nervous system. So as we studied that the brain stem or medulla oblongata, that uh, continues to form the spinal cord, and the spinal cord that move down almost the whole length of the backbone. Spinal cord, that is protected by the bone box, which is named as, or bone cage, which is named as vertebral column. Spinal cord, the functions, let us see the functions of spinal cord. Here is a structure of spinal cord. As we can see, this is a transverse section of spinal cord, in which we can see that the middle region is formed of the cell body of the neuron, the cell body or cyton of the neuron, which we can call it as gray matter, and the periphery of the spinal cord, that is of white color, means it is formed of the axon part of the neuron. That is why it is also known as white matter. So in the brain we studied that the gray matter was present at the periphery, and towards the center was a white matter. But the thing happens opposite. The thing is opposite in the spinal cord, in which we can see that the gray matter is present right at the center, and the white matter is present at the periphery. And at the center we can find a canal, which we can call it as a central canal, which is filled by the cerebrospinal fluid. Now the function of spinal cord, first is to control the reflexes below the neck. Secondly, it conducts the sensory impulses from the skin and muscles to the brain. And when the brain commands, it helps in conveying the message from the brain to the trunk or limbs, or we can call it as the muscles or the glands or the effector. Okay, so this is a work of a spinal cord. Let us now talk about peripheral nervous system. Let us now talk about peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, it consists of two types of system: somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Autonomic, from the word we can make out that it happens, the actions happen automatic. So that means it controls the involuntary actions of our body. And on the other hand, somatic nervous system controls the voluntary actions of our body. Somatic nervous system contains two types of nerves, that is cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Cranial nerves, from the word we can make out the nerves which arises from the uh, cranial part, that is the brain, or the organs which are present in the cranial part of our body, and that moves directly to the brain. So the sensory organs, we can say the sensory organs that is directly connected to the brain. And in case of spinal nervous system, what we can say, that the system or the impulses which are moved from the uh, sensory organs to the first to the spinal cord and then to the brain. So that type of nerves which arises from the spinal cord is known as spinal nerves, and cranial nerves, that is the nerves arising from the brain and directly it is conveyed to the connected to the sensory organs. So there are two types of somatic nervous system, that is cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Then coming to the autonomic nervous system, in this we can see we can study about sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system that activates our body, and in case of sympathetic nervous system, that controls the uh, activities when the hormone, that is adrenaline, is released. So as we know, adrenaline is released when released to excite the body. So when our body gets excited, so at that time the system that works, that is sympathetic nervous system, and parasympathetic nervous system is the system when our body is in relaxed mode or is in resting mode. So these are the two types of autonomic nervous system. So here are some examples of sympathetic and autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, like in case of heart, the heart accelerates heartbeat, that is the an example of sympathetic nervous system, and when the heart relaxes, at that time parasympathetic nervous system acts. Lungs, dilates bronchi and bronchioles, that is in case of that sympathetic nervous system works, constricts bronchi and bronchioles, at this time parasympathetic nervous system acts. Intestine peristalsis decreased, in this case sympathetic nervous system performs the function. Peristalsis increased, at this time parasympathetic nervous system does the function. So here are some types of examples which we can see in case of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So here is a flow chart by the help of which we can see the components of nervous system, what all things are included in it. So in this case we can see that the nervous system is divided into two parts, that is central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system contains brain and spinal cord. On the other hand, peripheral nervous system contains somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system. Central nervous system, as it contains brain is divided into three parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. Somatic nervous system that contains cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Autonomic nervous system, it contains two types of nervous system, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So these are the components of nervous system. So in our next video we'll be talking about voluntary actions and involuntary actions.